So today I have the Lloyd Fox with me. Lloyd, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thank you for inviting me to spend some time with you. Always great to see you.
I asked Lloyd to come by today because he has really had an amazing last 6 months, and you're starting over, and you've been in the real estate game for a really long time. And so I just wanted to kind of dive into what led up to this, and what your concerns are to start over after you've been in real estate 20 plus years.
Yes, I started in 2001, owned a franchise since 2005, and now an independent.
Yeah.
So I'm now outside of the franchise world. I think I had a very good run with our franchisor, and it was just time. It was time for a lot of different reasons, and not to go into that, but and I'm not young, right? So I can qualify for an adult community to I can show myself profitable.
You're young.
Yeah, okay. But most people at this point in their life, they're looking to dial down. I mean, 55 is a retirement age, and I'm beyond that. And for me, retirement doesn't look like that. But that's a whole different topic. So starting now just means I'm starting with a whole lot more experience, and wisdom. And it's applying those things. And, I'm always one that wants to redesign something or shake things up. And this is a chance to kind of shake it up. And if given today's market, given the world today, if you had to start over, if you had to build it from ground up, what would you do? Well, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And, so I'm excited about the new brand with 1912 Realty. It's new to everybody now that it's been put out there, but the interesting thing is life goes full circle sometimes. And my original LLC was what this is 1912 Realty LLC. And I started developing 1912 Realty in 2004.
Oh my gosh. And a circle.
Yeah.
So you had this idea. This is obviously part of your soul, part of your essence. So tell me about 1912 Realty. Like, where does that come from, and why does it resonate with you?
Well, it still resonates to me today, even though I started thinking about this in 2004. And in 2004, I was 3 years into the business. I really enjoy helping people to grow their careers and advance people. And that's the missing element for me. I could be doing a whole lot more transaction-wise and a lot more volume, but I wanted to balance that out with contributing and growing people's careers in the business and being a mentor to those who want to do this at a high level and be a great professional. So it was either, do I build my own brand? At that time, it would have been called, and now is, 1912 Realty, or do I go a franchise route? I chose the franchise route. Why was 1912 my choice at the time? And a lot of people were like, why are you not using your name? Because I didn't want my name on. And I didn't want it in the franchise name either, but I got outvoted by people who were coming with me. That's what they wanted. I didn't want people to join a brokerage and I'm the name on it and the face of it. And I think sometimes agents are apprehensive about working with somebody who's the broker, the owner, the mentor, and also out there working with buyers and sellers. So I wanted my name out of it. And I'm just a huge fan of Arizona.
You are.
And with, you don't get to choose where you're born. And some people call home where they're born or where their first years of life were. But you do get to choose what's home.
Yeah.
And for me, Arizona is home. I love this state. I love everything about it. I think it's a special place to be able to live, grow a career. And there's nowhere else I'd rather live, be honest. Not anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, quite frankly.
And 1912
was the year Arizona became Arizona became a state and out of being a territory on February 14th, Valentine's Day in 1912. So I think it just really tells people we're a local brand.
Yeah.
We're all about Arizona. We don't need to be a global thing. We have global networks, if you will.
Yeah.
But we want to specialize in what Arizona is all about and take care of the people who want to call this home or have home or some kind of income property.
And the branding and logo is so cool. I mean, you can maybe see the pen,
little Arizona
and the hat.
It's all very heavy on copper. That's one of our 5 C's. If you grew up here, you know something about the 5 C's being copper, cattle, cotton, climate, and citrus. And, copper is just an easy color. Not a lot of people use it in things, but it is such an essential element and such an essential element to Arizona's growth and prosperity over the years. So I thought lead with copper. We've got black, of course, because the silhouettes of everything with our tremendous sunsets here are so cool. And then what iconic plant can you throw in there other than a saguaro?
Yeah.
So I love my saguaro cactus. I mean, and why does our saguaro have 3 arms on it? Because the quarters, people remember when the government came out with a quarter edition, every state had their own quarter. Well, the saguaro cactus on the quarter, which are the cufflinks I'm wearing today, it has 3 arms as well. So I like to really draw upon our history. And I think if you follow us with social media and brand development, you're going to see a lot that reflects back upon the wild Arizona of yesteryear and the wild, and then the beautiful and cool Arizona of today.
Yeah.
And it's 2 totally different worlds.
Let's dive into the journey. So, you're with your previous franchise for 18 years. What are you going to do different now? Because obviously when you're in a franchise, you're really not necessarily, you have some control, but it's really preset by the brand. This is all yours. Like, what are you doing different? And how does that impact the real estate agents that are working with you?
Well, it's a great question. For me, one, you start with brand development, right? You have to be what I feel like you got to be visually appealing to begin with. Mm-hmm. So the essential, launch, if you will, of the brand, I think went really well. I'm very excited about our branding, the logo, if you look at our social media, everything's cohesive. Everything's very on brand, from the font to every detail. And I think consistency is so important, because I think you want your agents to also, and your clients, to be proud of the brand that's put in the front yard, the brand that you represent. In branding, that's the icing component, right? The frosting. Mm-hmm. Frosting's nice, but if it's all frosting, it kind of starts to get overly sweet and you're done. Now it's about building the cake. And it's about the other components of building a brokerage from the ground up that is supporting of the agents, because that's where it begins. You have to have great training, great tools, great assets for the agents, because as prepared as they are is as well as our clients are going to be served. So, we have our own training program that I've been developing over years called Operation Realization. It's a 3-prong approach for agents. No matter where they're at in their career, we can advance them with regard to their career development, their personal development, because I think in this business, it can be so consuming that you lose track of yourself, your family, your friends, and you stop taking care of you. So we have a personal growth track. And then the other side of it is the financial savvy component. In other words, if you're going to function in real estate, and the most millionaires in the world are made millionaires through the vehicle of real estate, then how are you a licensee and not growing your real estate portfolio and taking advantage of the product that you believe in and that you're competent enough to know? So whether it's, a remodel, build from scratch, investment properties, buy and hold, whatever that is, we have that track.
Yeah. So let's get juicy. You ready?
Yeah.
Because I did not share any of these thoughts or questions with you. You just dropped by. I was like, put it at the top. All right. So how does the pending NAR settlement, how is that going to change your approach to this new brokerage, to real estate, and to growing your agents?
Well, number one, I think it allows us to differentiate ourselves at a fantastic time. So a lot of people are like, do you want to do this provided the new settlement? And I said, even more so. I know that the Arizona Association of Realtors is currently developing, if you will, their buyer-broker agreement, things like that. And that's fantastic. We will not be using that at 1920. We're going to be drafting our. There will be components of what they draft that we will certainly use. There will be good guidelines that they're going to have in place. But there will be things that we want to take into consideration when we, one, educate our buying community, and then two, how we transact and work with the buying community. And I think the number one thing is demonstrating your value. It's nice to have, hey, this is what you need to sign in order for us to work together. That's great. But why? Why should they work with you? So it's about, within the component of that agreement should be what an agent does for you, because I don't think it's always crystal clear to the public as to all the things that an agent does. And we have to bring that back. And we've always had a class at the brokerage, which is listing your buyers. And nobody ever looked at it. But I've been teaching that for 15 years. So now it's melding that with the requirements that we now have. And I think it's just fine. Will things change all that much? I don't really think so. I think that the first 6 months, you have a lot of opportunists. You're going to have a lot of people thinking, well, we don't have to pay anybody. Well, you've never had to.
Right. So let's talk about that, because I think there's so much noise out there and so much misunderstanding about what this whole thing is about. So just kind of, as best as you can, chunk it down and give us the simplified version of, what the actual issue is or was.
I think the main issue is and was too many agents were out there saying, well, you don't have to pay me. I work for free.
Oh, okay.
Because they made it sound like the seller pays everything, which is also a mistake. Completely false, completely inaccurate. We can go into that. But the essence of it was too much misinformation, more than anything else. And a lot of the Department of Justice, I wish, quite frankly, had spoken to more people around the country in different markets. And I think their decision was made up very early as to what they need to do in order to fix what they deemed to be a broken system. And it wasn't broken. It was very organized. It was very cohesive. And it was certainly not an antitrust situation. Absolutely not. You had every option in the world as a consumer. It always, one, you don't have to work if you don't want to. So I had people, even when I was a listing agent, approach me as a buyer and say, we're unrepresented and we don't want to be represented. Well, we can talk about how that all works, because that's not easy. And from the seller's perspective, now they're going to feel like, well, we don't have to pay our buyers. Okay, well, do you want me to do the best for selling your home? Because offering compensation to the people who represent 40 plus thousand agents are going to represent buyers.
Right. So why would you exclude them?
They're going to be under an agreement. They're going to be under exclusive agreements now. So it's actually made it even more solidified that it's going to be pre-written into their agreements what their agreement is. So who knows what they're going to be paid, but any deficiency is going to be requested in the purchase contract. So if anybody's listing property saying, well, you're not going to have to pay one. Well, that may or may not be true. Most likely it's not true, but it's very misleading and could be potentially very opportunistic going, well, list with us because you'll never have to pay your buyers. Well, if they have to sell their property, I find that property does best with competition. Well, if everybody representing a buyer is unwilling to show your property or do something with it because you're unwilling to pay everybody, then that's going to be different.
So let's go back, because you started to go there and then you said that's for another time, but let's just make that time right now. So let's talk about, in the current model, how real estate agents get paid.
Well, I think for a lot of people, math is hard.
Okay.
And concepts are hard. And I think most people tend to think only about themselves and where they stand in the flow of a transaction. So they think the flow of money, they think because that original agreement, if you will, in current practice, is signed by the seller as to what the total commission is and what gets paid to a buyer's agent, that the seller's paying all the commission. That's ego. And it's not accurate, completely false. So let's take that example for a second, put that on ice, and let's talk about something that a lot of people can relate to. Let's say you go buy a 6-pack of beer, something that's not far-fetched. Okay?
Not at all.
So when I go as a buyer of the beer, I put the 6-pack at the register, I know the price. I know what I'm willing to pay for it. It's what I'm willing to pay for the product before me. That product sitting in front of that cash register, I'm certain there was a salesperson paid, there was a distribution fee on it, there's a tax on it, there's all these other fees. Who pays now? Who's bringing the money to the table? So my entire time in this business, I have yet to have a seller go, okay, so the total commissions are X. Okay, can I write a check now? That's never happened. Because what does the seller need for that to happen? They need the buyer and the buyer's lender to bring the money to the table. Oh, whose money? Whose money is bringing it? So it's a balanced equation right now and should always be. The buyer's agent was also paid by the buyer. Yeah. To say it's all paid by the seller is false. And it was, let's face it, it was an easier way to get everything, if you will, organized, finished, very crystal clear. Everybody knew exactly what everybody was making on the closing. I don't get that when I buy the beer. I don't know who made what. Right. I don't know what the fee was for what. I don't get to negotiate any of that. All I know is it's X dollars for what's before.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, again, the seller knows what they need to net. The buyer knows what they're willing to pay and everything associated with it. I don't think things will be that much different after the first 6 months of this agreement being in place. I think it'll shake itself out. I don't think we'll see as much change as the doomsdayers want to make it sound.
Okay. So I think from an agent standpoint, what is your recommendation? So if you're a listing agent, having certain thought tracks kind of lined up and providing the transparency that this whole settlement is really, I think, trying to bring to the surface. So is that your recommendation? And probably for a buyer's agent, I would guess, really honing in on the value. I think, there is, what does a real estate agent do for me if I'm a buyer?
Yeah, let's face it. There are listing agents that make more than other listing agents. There will be buyer's agents that make more than other buyer's agents because they're able to convey the value that they bring to the table for the buyer. If you can't sell your services, you're going to have an issue. I mean, that's going to be the biggest problem as things move forward. But that I just don't see things changing all that much. I really don't.
But one piece of this is that now compensation can't be included in MLS. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, why would you want to put it in the number one place that a seller and put out what they're offering for compensation? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense at all. Now what? We're going to hang it on a sign. We're going to have to call everybody. I mean, it is going to be more labor intensive. And I hate to say this, but it's going to open up for a lot of gameplay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're with who? Or, oh, I like you. I'll offer this. Right? I mean, it's going to get a little bit weird in that regard, but you're going to have to call and find out. Because if you have an agreement with your buyer that your buyer is responsible for X, and what this individual is willing to pay is short of X, what's that buyer's liability going for? Mm-hmm. Or is it the entire liability? At that point, the buyer might just say, well, I can't do that, so I don't want to see it.
Okay.
And that's within their right.
Yeah.
And there will be some sellers that, I don't want to pay the buying public agent, or, well, you don't have to. You've never had to. You don't have to today, but I don't represent for sale by owners either. So I'm only successful for my clients if they allow me to help them succeed.
Yeah.
But if I'm handcuffed because they think it's a money grab,
mm-hmm.
I mean, we're just probably not going to be working again.
Yeah.
But it's not realistic. And for even people that do a for sale by owner, everybody coming through that door subtracts X because they're not represented and neither are you.
Mm-hmm.
They all play this game. So if people think prices are going to go down, I assure you they're not. Every seller is looking at like, no, this is my time to profit more. And the buyers are going, hell no. you're going to have to pay my agent, or I'm going to have to pay him.
Yeah.
And, it's worked out quite well because in the lending world, and the lenders know exactly what's going on, and the commissions are in that loan and that down payment.
Yeah.
They're absolutely in there. And not every buyer has the ability to bring that kind of money to the table.
That's right.
So this could be, I don't think the DOJ intended this, but this could be just another continental divide.
I agree.
Produced by the government between haves and have-nots. And it's framed as go after the agents because of commissions. Reality, who's it really hurting?
Yeah.
It won't be the agents.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to create disparity between the people that could potentially pay the difference and those that can't. And that concerns me. Yeah. Because maybe somebody isn't in the position to make up the difference of what will be paid through the purchase, acquisition, etc. They just don't have the cash, if you will.
Today's market is different. It's a lot more level playing field than we had before. But wait until we have a robust market again.
Agreed.
And every buyer who doesn't have the means is going to get destroyed by those who do. And only those with big money will be the ones that get the properties they want. And everyone else is going to feel like they're getting the scraps.
Yeah.
And it was all produced out of this one decision. And that's real work. They can look at it in a test tube and go, hey, this makes sense to us, sitting in an office in Washington. Go out in the real world. It doesn't really make sense. And it's not going to be, I think, it's not going to be very healthy for the consumer at all. It also opens it up for something that really makes me sad. Everybody talks about clear cooperation, how it was a horrible thing to do. And because it controlled the seller's ability to market things in a different way. So if you had a public-facing kind of advertisement or demonstration that you had this property for sale, you had to have it in the MLS within a day. And a lot of people, me included at the time, were opposed to it. I thought it was a big restriction on trade from a seller standpoint, much like we're again. And I actually went to the meeting, and there were some speakers that were on the floor speaking for it. I changed my mind within a matter of
There.
And all I had to hear was, because I don't really feel it here, but in other parts of the country, they felt like properties were being held back based upon race, religion, all the fair housing issues. And I said, wait a minute. My perception is unwarranted and not as important as what I'm hearing. I understand. I get it. But I think now what we've done is reintroduce the ability for people to be profiled and what the seller or seller's agent is going to pay based upon who you are, based upon how you look. You don't think that's going to happen more now? You're completely ignorant of what the real world is. And I hate to say that, but it is the truth. And I don't know why the civil rights portion of the Department of Justice didn't speak up for this. I'm blown away by it.
So if you're taking the listing, you're a listing agent, and you and the seller have agreed on a price to list the house at, and you've agreed on what the tolerance is for commission paid, if you will, right? Isn't that preset part of the agreement? And then, so if that's the case, how could then you vary and say, well, for you, Mr. Buyer, you're only going to get, your agent's only going to get paid 1%. For you, Mr. Buyer, your agent's going to get 0%, because you already have it in a contract with the seller and they're the listing.
Maybe.
Oh, so that's not requirement anymore? Or
you'll have a listing agreement, but what they just also did is, what was the most transparent place where the seller could see exactly what was offering all the
NMLS?
Right.
And they took it out.
Right. So what you're opening Pandora's box with, listen, you take any rule out there, there are going to be a subset of people that are going to break.
Yeah.
and the seller could always see exactly what was out. Could it change the conversations? Could it change what happens after the contract is signed and the seller is unaware? 100%.
John. Okay, let's jump into dual agency. What does that really mean? So let's just kind of paint a picture, right? All right, so you have a house listed for sale, or you're representing the seller who has a house listed for sale. You're hosting an open house, and a potential buyer comes through the door, and that buyer does not have representation. I think part of the danger right now is all this noise and social media and the news and everything else is leading buyers to believe that they could just have the listing agent represent them, and then they would save money. And maybe the money part of that could be true, but talk to me about representation in that scenario. Meaning that would the buyer be equally represented? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. And then how do listing agents convey that? And then you and I both know, from a lending standpoint, a real estate standpoint, so much happens during that process. Right. That now you have one agent that's going to play both sides of the fence. Like, how does that even work?
One, dual agency isn't even allowed or legal in every state.
Okay.
It is here. As a licensee, I have a fiduciary commitment to my client. That's a legal obligation to the seller. That's where it starts. Because you're talking about an open house, I already have a legal obligation to the client. I'm sitting at open.
Right.
So who do I represent?
The seller.
Correct. Buyer comes in, I'd like you to represent both parties. I no longer, if everybody agrees, and one, I have to have the seller's agreement to even have that conversation to begin with. There's some sellers who are going to say, no, you work for me, and that'll be a hard pass for any buyer going, well, I would just like you to represent both. Seller's not open to that. Sorry.
Okay.
It's not offered here.
Okay.
All right. So there's that part of it. But once you get put in that role, if you're really good at what you're doing, you become a mediator.
Mm-hmm.
I don't enjoy being a mediator. You can't serve two masters. I don't care what anyone tells me. You go to court. There's a reason why somebody is representing one party and somebody is representing the other. Because along the way, you're going to do something where somebody's going to say, that wasn't fair, or you compromised me here, or in our dual agency form, it doesn't say domain. It says there will be conflicts when it comes to obedience, loyalty. I mean,
yeah.
You just take all those fiduciary responsibilities and flush them right down the can. And that's a horrible place to be, because it all sounds well and good until it's not. And everybody starts out like they're the best of friends. We're going to make this happen until there's a problem.
Yeah.
And then nobody's talking anymore. And then when it's really ugly, and it is a tough line to straddle when you're a mediator trying to serve two parties. And it sounds good. Oh, we're going to save a little bit of money here. But are you really?
Yeah.
You're really not. Because the reality is, the seller is sitting there, the buyer is sitting there, well, I'm going to reduce it X because only one agent involved, and the seller, everybody's subtracting their own piece of the pie. As I said earlier, everybody looks at their own scenario and thinks it all centers around them. And hello? Yeah, it really doesn't, folks. A transaction takes two parties. Each of those parties could be represented by their own agent, and everybody would be a lot happier.
Yeah. Let's talk about buyer representation. Let's just, what are the top 5 things that, a buyer's agent does for a buyer? Because again, I don't think this is being told, and I know there's 100, but let's just hone in on the most important things, and then I'll give you my input after sitting in this seat for 30 years.
Well, I think number one, the buying public goes forward in a passenger seat before they sit down and talk about what they're doing. It's like, I've got a client, let's go look at some places, and we're out shopping. That's the equivalent of showing up with a seller and sticking the sign in the yard before you've even gone over how we're going to work.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think is going to be great for the buying public now is they're going to hopefully, depending upon who they're meeting with and their expertise, they're going to have a whole lot more direction about how this process really works. And there's a big difference. I mean, let's face it, there's a gazillion agents out there and they all have licenses. The whole world has a driver's license, but there's only a few that go to rip around at the Indy 500 and drive at that level. It's the same with real estate agents. Yep. You really have people that perform at this level up here, and then there's a bunch of people who have license.
Right.
So, top things, number one, it's not about finding them a home. Everyone thinks that. That's the number one thing the public talks about. I need an agent to find me a home. Oh, wait, I have an access. I've got this cell phone thing, smartphone. It's so smart. It can show me all the properties that are available, and I can do it all on my own. Sure you can. Worse. No. A very good professional is fixed on not just finding you a home. They're fixed on making sure it's the right home. And finding you the right home is not an ego thing. It is about understanding the buyer when it comes to what they need out of a home through an interview. What their budget is. What is important to them with a sense of community. Tying all of that together and making sure that not just getting you a home, but making sure that the day you close, 1 month later, a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, that buyer can look back on it and go, we made a great decision. And our agent did a masterful job of making sure we didn't just choose a home. We chose the right home for us. And we didn't have to make a second move. Was the agent concentrating on the obvious? Oh, these are granite counters. Well, wow, who knew that? Is the agent pointing out the things that they should be aware of? Is the agent looking for things that the buyer's not looking for? Is the agent providing a pros and cons about the property, the area, the everything? A good one should be. And then when they're ready to move forward, is the agent going through and evaluating the value of the property? Are they guiding them and helping them through the process of not only evaluating the value of the property, but the condition of the property, and then helping them to potentially either renegotiate or to say, move on? Because sometimes the best choice is to not stick with this. So put the paint chips away and the measuring tape, because when we go through this inspection, your best decision today is probably to cancel. And I want you to listen to this inspector really close, because this impacts you maybe for the rest of your life. It's big of a decision. And like I said before, everything starts out itchy.
Yeah.
But every single transaction typically has at least one bump, several. And then you need the agent that can help you navigate through those times. And that is a good quality communicator and professional that is also tied in with the other people that are important elements in the team of transacting. And for a buyer, that's great communication with the lender.
Yeah.
And teaming up with somebody is taking as good a care of the client and the buyer as you're committed to, and not leaving things for chance. That's one of the benefits I always have of working with you and your team, is I know they're going to be well taken. They're going to be highly educated in the process, and they will have made a great decision because you will help them to make a great one. And there's no hiccups with that.
Yeah. I also think, yes, I agree with you, but from my seat, I see just the overall strategy of acquiring the property, the price paid, what happens through the inspection period, how you counter that, how some don't. You can see the strong agents and how they perform during that time. And I think that it's one of those things that as a buyer that you don't always know what's happening behind, the curtain, but those are the things that really do make a difference. And in the end, we have happy
100%. I mean, because that, if you're a buyer right now and you're thinking, so how do I evaluate? So, well, other than what you're seeing on paper, is the person that you're thinking about representing you, are they a chess player? or are they straight line thing? And the best agents are the ones who think moves ahead, who can negotiate that way, structure things that way. And like I said before, when I engage with the client, it's a fiduciary responsibility, a legal obligation to do the best I possibly can for that client. And I have to think that way in every single interactive that I have.
For sure.
And I don't think most people have that ability. I just don't think it's there. And I think that's part of, for the agents that, I love looking at homes. This is so good. Maybe you're not meant to be in this business because, this is a chess match. You're a counselor. You're helping people to manage their emotions also through a very difficult process.
Yeah.
You become a counselor in many of these transactions, helping people to do the best that they can to manage expectations and the emotions and everything that comes into play. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It really is. But it's a hell of a lot of fun too.
Well, you're good at it. No doubt.
People.
No doubt. All right. So as we wrap up, you've had so much change in just your business. The industry, the real estate industry is going through so much change. So what's your one piece of advice when somebody is starting over? Because essentially the real estate community itself is kind of doing a redo. There's a start over here with the NAR settlement. And with 1912, it's absolutely a start over. So what's the one piece of advice?
Filter the messaging.
Yeah. Okay.
Just like with anything else in this world. If you're a practitioner, filter the message. There will be people that speak with you fear-mongering and run for the hills and we can solve this. We're the only ones that know how to solve this for you. Come to us. And stop. Filter out the garbage. Understand the things before you. Align yourself with those people who really care about you, who care about the people you'll ultimately represent, and have if you're confident that they can help you navigate the waters ahead, that's the key. But we can't change the judgment. We can't change all this other stuff. But what we can do, change the way that we work, and more importantly, we can change the way that we approach things, stay positive about it, and make this work for everybody.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to see all the things that you are doing out there with 1912 Realty.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Thank you. Appreciate it.